I'll call to order this special called meeting of the Nelson County School Board on Wednesday, January 24th, 2018 at approximately 5 p.m. We'll start out tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Nelson County Schools Board Mission Statement. The Nelson County Board of Education, representatives of our citizens and entrusted with their children, pledges to support the mission of the Nelson County School District by setting visionary direction through effective policy, oversight, and efficient resource management. The district vision statement, quality education now, learning for life. Before we do move on into the agenda, in light of the tragedies this week down in Marshall County, and I'm sure there may even be some of us in the audience like myself that have friends down that way or know educators in that school district. If we would, I'd just like us to take a few moments of silence. Thank you. So being a special call meeting, there are no changes to the agenda. It is as presented, which is the same agenda that we would have had last Tuesday if it wasn't for Mother Nature messing with us. So moving on into item 3, student and shareholder engagement. 3A, the student performance. Mr. Brown?
Yes, I want to introduce Ms. Stephanie Smith, the principal at Bloomfield Elementary.
Thank you all. We appreciate you having us. We have 4 presenters today, and they are going to be, in what order? I'm not sure. Who's going first? We have Jacob Willett, who will be going first.
Where do I stand?
Just
Right there, big
okay.
I was the 12th President of the United States of America. However, I died in office a little over a year into my term. Although experts say my death was due to natural causes, there were conspiracy theories that I've been poisoned. This conspiracy lasted until 2010. Before becoming president, I was a career Army man with the rank of Major General. I received the nickname Old Rough and Ready during the Mexican-American War. Although I led winning battles in the War of 1812, such as the war between Great Britain, where the poem Star Spangled Banner was written. I was convinced to get into politics after the Whigs asked me to run for president after I led my troops over the Mexico-Texas border. They asked me to run with Millard Fillmore as my vice president. I had no real ticket or agenda, I just wanted to protect the United States. My death came on a year into my term. It was a hot July day, and I had just enjoyed a late night snack of fresh cherries and milk. That night I had a terrible stomach ache and died. I was buried in a congressional cemetery in a public vault. This vault was for politicians that died while serving in the nation's capital. A few months later, I was taken to Louisville, Kentucky on my family's farm, Springfield. After almost 150 years, my descendants decided to have my body exhumed and checked for poison. In 1991, the chief medical examiner concluded that my death wasn't due to arsenic poisoning. I am Zachary Taylor, the 12th President of the United States of America.
Scarlett Ann Williams will be next.
Hi, my name is Betsy Ross. My original name is Elizabeth Griscom. I was born January 1st, 1752, and in a house called the Old Glory House, located in Philadelphia. I'm the 8th of 17 children. I was born in a Quaker family. I was known for making the first flag for the United States of America. My mother and father's names were Samuel Griscombe and Rebecca James. In 1773, I married my first husband, John Ross. After that, I was removed from the Quaker church because John was not a Quaker. After that, John and I started our own upholstery shop. Let me tell you a story. One day I was at my upholstery shop and I heard a knock on the door. It was General George Washington, and he asked if I wanted to make the first flag for the United States of America. It was going to take me so long that I showed them a 5-point star instead of 6, and they agreed to my design. 3 years later, John died of a gunpowder explosion. 1 year later, I married Joseph Ashburn. 5 years later, he was captured by a British ship and died in prison. A year later, I married John Claypool, and we had 15 children. After that, I went back to making tablecloths at the upholstery shop. 30 years later, John died. January 30th, 1836, I died of natural causes, and I was forever famous for making the first flag for the United States of America.
The moral of the story is don't marry Betsy Ross.
Next up, we have Tommy Zabinka.
I am Daniel Boone, a frontierman and explorer. I am best known for my help in settling and exploring the beautiful state known as Kentucky. I was born in Pennsylvania, 1734, 32 years before the United States was a country. In the last few years that America was a colony of England, I was sent to help explore the New World, known as Kentucky. I blazed through the Wilderness Road and made my way through the Cumberland Gap and the Appalachian Mountains, and settled Boonesboro, one of the first settlements in Kentucky. When the Revolutionary War broke out, I helped lead the militia, fighting mostly with the Native Americans who were supplied with weapons and supplies from the British. After the Revolutionary War, my family and I settled in Kentucky with my wife Rebecca and my 10 children. I continued to explore and settle the new frontier. We had many scraps with the Indians, especially the Shawnee. When Kentucky became the 15th state to join the Union, I began to get restless and helped settle and explore both Tennessee and Missouri. It was in Missouri that I died in 1820 after living for 85 years. A really long time back in the day. I was buried in Missouri, but not long after my family had me moved to Frankfort, Kentucky, up on a hill overlooking the Kentucky River in the capital city of Frankfort. Kentucky has a county named after me, Boone County. It has located near Cincinnati, and 2 identical statues of me, one at the campus of Eastern Kentucky University and the other in Louisville. In the 1960s, NBC aired a 60-minute series about my life. I am Daniel Boone, an American folk hero.
Last but not least, we have Emily Sanders.
Good evening and welcome. I'd like to introduce myself to you. My name is Roseville Monroe, but thanks to a wartime poster during World War II, most people call me Rose the Riveter. I was born in Scienceau, Kentucky. I was one of 9 children. I worked alongside my father and became a very skilled laborer. My mother once said in an interview there wasn't a tool I couldn't use. In the 1940s, as a young woman in my 20s, I was a widow. To support myself like many other women at the time, I went to go help with the defense. I worked in a small aircraft factory in Michigan where I was trained to fly B-29 and B-24 bomber planes. Later, I was discovered and was asked to be in a promotional film for War Bonds and also became the face of Rose the Riveter. Not long after that, my face was all over the place, in the newsreels, playing at movie houses, and the newspapers. But the most popular one, and the one people most remember, were the posters. The most popular one came out in 1942 by the artist J. Howard Miller. There were also many other ones, including Norman Rockwell, and my face appeared at the Memorial Day edition of the Saturday Evening Post. After the war, I moved to Indiana, where I continued to work as a laborer. I worked on assembly lines as a seamstress, a beauty shop owner, and a taxi driver. I also discovered that I could build houses. I started my own company, Rose Builders. We specialize in luxury homes. At the age of 50, I finally obtained my pilot's license, and I even taught my daughter how to drive. In 1987, I was involved with a plane crash, damaging one of my kidneys, but I still lived to the age of 77, dying in 1997.
I would like to thank our presenters today. Of course, you can see that I don't do very well with memorizing things, but these folks sure do. And so I greatly appreciate their time and effort, as well as with Mr. Parks. He's worked closely with all 4 of these students. And so I'd just like to thank you as well, Mr. Parks.
And she didn't say this, but they wrote it on my block as well.
Good job, good job.
So Rosie, I mean, the monologue then, was that based upon you doing research on it, and then you had to come up with what are the key facts, and what is it that I would want to share if I was Rosie?
Good evening, my name is Emily Sanders, and I will be reading the good news from each of the schools for the month of January. Students at the Academy completed 217 APEX courses during the first semester. This is a 228% increase from the 2016-17 and the 150% increase from the 2015-16. These students and faculty have worked hard on attaining credits needed for their graduation requirements. 5th grade band students at Bloomfield Elementary performed at the high school, and for the first time by themselves for our entire school. Mr. Parks has worked extremely hard to develop and mentor these students. Students and staff members have collected 400 pounds of bottle caps to get a bench for our playground area, and now we're working towards our second bench. Bloomfield Middle School archery team is off to a fast start, already winning 2 different tournaments. The Boston School raised nearly $6,000 to support a former teacher who has undergone brain cancer. This was primarily raised by students, and we are very humbled and honored by their giving spirits. Cox's Creek Elementary School had a wonderful turnout at their Christmas program with the 4th and 5th grade students. This program was diverse and encompassed many learning targets in music. The Early Learning Center Leader in Me teams on culture, leadership, and academics. They're gearing up for a strong semester with student and staff recognition and student WIG's wildly important goals. They're academically focusing on male students to increase their overall kindergarten readiness in the district. Foster Heights students work diligently to complete their NTI Best State work via Google Classroom. Nelson County High School sophomore Laurel Philpott won Cosair Charities and Gilda's Club Writing Contest. Also, freshman Holden Underwood has been selected for a KMEA All-State Choir. New Haven's music teacher Angela Bennett put on a great winter program in December. She held a K-3 program followed by a 4-5 program. There was a standing room only at both programs. The program was combined with our PTO Cookies with Santa program, which was equally successful. New Haven School was excited to host 2 successful community events. Thomas Nelson High School freshman Ryan Hack has started a monthly podcast. The podcast is called Communicrates. It connects Thomas Nelson High School students with community leaders to discuss what it means to be a leader. 14 students out of the Nelson County ATC's phlebotomy technology class passed the NHA certification test to become certified phlebotomy technicians. These students had performed 30 venipuncture sticks, 10 capillary sticks, and passed the NHA phlebotomy technician test.
Well, in that last group, that's some of the same students that came and stuck us that night.
Just want to remind everyone that this is Board Appreciation, School Board Appreciation Month, and our schools have been, all of our schools have been participating, and they've brought some gifts and different things for our school board members. But at this time, I'd like for all of us to kind of give a round of applause to these people who work so hard and diligently for our children. Next in this area, we'll introduce Ms. Jamie Schnell.
Hi, how are you guys? Hi, everybody. So I'm here to present several educators tonight. I'm super excited. The most that we've had at one board meeting that have received their Google Level 1 certification or their Google Level 2 certification. And so we'll go ahead and get started. When I call your name, if you'll come up and receive your certificate, and then just stay up here so we can get a group picture. Renee Shannon from Nelson County High School. Congratulations. Yes, absolutely. Amy Jo Sims from Cox's Creek. Congratulations to you. Amelia Satterley from Cox's Creek. You're welcome. Elizabeth Crow, or Beth Crow, like I call her, from Cox's Creek as well. Thank you. This lady was our very first Google certified educator at the board, and that is Anne Marie Williams. Congratulations to the lady. Holly Walker, which is the principal at the Early Learning Center. Congratulations. Jill Mattingly, which was not settled with level, she wouldn't settle with level 1, so she went ahead and completed level 2 as well. So, level 1 and 2 certified. Scott Rouse. And he is obviously the principal over at the Horizons. Congratulations. Miss Cheryl Pyle. I'm ready. You want to be in the picture. You got to be in the picture. There you go. Congratulations. She is also at the board. And Mr. Drew Warschlager. Did I say your last name right? Oh, see, I'm so good. So they all call him Mr. W. So he received his level 1 certification as well. So we had a busy snow Christmas break, and then a couple of snow days, NDI days. So these are our level 1 and level 2 Google certified educators for the month of January.
Ms. Chenault?
Yes.
So, I mean, there might be a lot of people sitting in the audience that don't know, I mean, what does it take to be a Google certified educator?
So that's a really, look at
Yeah, because I heard from one of these members up here last night that they finished the 3-hour? 2-hour. 3-hour test with 7 minutes to spare.
Yeah, so they go through training. There are objective questions, and then there are performance questions where they actually have to do and interact with Google, within Google, and then they have to complete the test, which is 3 hours. So I would say probably an easy, at least 6 to 10 hours of work to receive this.
Right,
And that's just for level 1. That's not level 2.
And whenever you say within Google, of course, most people are going to think, oh, well, Google, that's where I go to type in, where's a good place to eat. It's not Google per se as much as all the other tools.
Right.
Like productivity tools.
But I do want to
I have motions and seconds.
I'll call to order this special called meeting of the Nelson County School Board on Wednesday, January 24th, 2018 at approximately 5 p.m. We'll start out tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Nelson County Schools Board Mission Statement. The Nelson County Board of Education, representatives of our citizens and entrusted with their children, pledges to support the mission of the Nelson County School District by setting visionary direction through effective policy, oversight, and efficient resource management. The district vision statement, quality education now, learning for life. Before we do move on into the agenda, in light of the tragedies this week down in Marshall County, and I'm sure there may even be some of us in the audience like myself that have friends down that way or know educators in that school district. If we would, I'd just like us to take a few moments of silence. Thank you. So being a special call meeting, there are no changes to the agenda. It is as presented, which is the same agenda that we would have had last Tuesday if it wasn't for Mother Nature messing with us. So moving on into item 3, student and shareholder engagement. 3A, the student performance. Mr. Brown?
Yes, I want to introduce Ms. Stephanie Smith, the principal at Bloomfield Elementary.
Thank you all. We appreciate you having us. We have 4 presenters today, and they are going to be, in what order, I'm not sure. Who's going first? We have Jacob Willett, who will be going first.
Where do I stand?
Right there, big
Okay.
I was the 12th President of the United States of America. However, I died in office a little over a year into my term. Although experts say my death was due to natural causes, there were conspiracy theories that I've been poisoned. This conspiracy lasted until 2010. Before becoming president, I was a career Army man with the rank of Major General. I received the nickname Old Rough and Ready during the Mexican-American War. Although I led winning battles in the War of 1812, such as the war between Great Britain, where the poem Star Spangled Banner was written. I was convinced to get into politics after the Whigs asked me to run for president after I led my troops over the Mexico-Texas border. They asked me to run with Millard Fillmore as my vice president. I had no real ticket or agenda, I just wanted to protect the United States. My death came on a year into my term. It was a hot July day, and I had just enjoyed a late night snack of fresh cherries and milk. That night I had a terrible stomach ache and died. I was buried in in the Congressional Cemetery in a public vault. This vault was for politicians that died while serving in the nation's capital. A few months later, I was taken to Louisville, Kentucky on my family's farm, Springfield. After almost 150 years, my descendants decided to have my body exhumed and checked for poison. In 1991, the chief medical examiner concluded that my death wasn't due to arsenic poisoning. I am Zachary Taylor, the 12th President of the United States of America.
Scarlett Ann Williams will be next.
Hi, my name is Betsy Ross. My original name is Elizabeth Griscom. I was born January 1st, 1752 in a house called the Old Glory House, located in Philadelphia. I'm the 8th of 17 children. I was born in a Quaker family. I was known for making the first flag for the United States of America. My mother and father's names were Samuel Griscom and Rebecca James. In 1773, I married my first husband, John Ross. After that, I was removed from the Quaker Church because John was not a Quaker. After that, John and I started our own upholstery shop. Let me tell you a story. One day I was at my upholstery shop and I heard a knock on the door. It was General George Washington, and he asked if I wanted to make the first flag for the United States of America. It was going to take me so long that I showed them a 5-point star instead of 6, and they agreed to my design. 3 years later, John died of a gunpowder explosion. 1 year later, I married Joseph Ashburn. 5 years later, he was captured by a British ship and died in prison. A year later, I married John Claypool, and we had 15 children. After that, I went back to making tablecloths at the upholstery shop. 30 years later, John died. January 30th, 1836, I died of natural causes, and I was forever famous for making the first flag for the United States of America.
The moral of the story is don't marry Betsy Ross.
Next up, we have Tommy Zabinka.
I am Daniel Boone, a frontierman and explorer. I am best known for my help in settling and exploring the beautiful state known as Kentucky. I was born in Pennsylvania, 1734, 32 years before the United States was a country. In the last few years that America was a colony of England, I was sent to help explore the New World, known as Kentucky. I blazed through the Wilderness Road and made my way through the Cumberland Gap and the Appalachian Mountains, and settled Boonesboro, one of the first settlements in Kentucky. When the Revolutionary War broke out, I helped lead the militia, fighting mostly with the Native Americans who were supplied with weapons and supplies from the British. After the Revolutionary War, my family and I settled in Kentucky with my wife Rebecca and my 10 children. I continued to explore and settle the new frontier. We had many scraps with the Indians, especially the Shawnee. When Kentucky became the 15th state to join the Union, I began to get restless and helped settle and explore both Tennessee and Missouri. It was in Missouri that I died in 1820 after living for 85 years. A really long time back in the day. I was buried in Missouri, but not long after my family had me moved to Frankfort, Kentucky, up on a hill overlooking the Kentucky River and the capital city of Frankfort. Kentucky has a county named after me, Boone County. It has located near Cincinnati, and 2 identical statues of me, one at the campus of Eastern Kentucky University and the other in Louisville. In the 1960s, NBC aired a 60-minute series about my life. I am Daniel Boone, an American folk hero.
Last but not least, we have Emily Sanders.
Good evening and welcome. I'd like to introduce myself to you. My name is Roswell Monroe, but thanks to wartime poster during World War II, most people call me Rose the Riveter. I was born in Science Hill, Kentucky. I was one of 9 children. I worked alongside my father and became a very skilled laborer. My mother once said in an interview there wasn't a tool I couldn't use. In the 1940s, as a young woman in my 20s, I was a widow. To support myself like many other women at the time, I went to go help with the defense. I worked in a small aircraft factory in Michigan where I was trained to fly B-29 and B-24 bomber planes. Later, I was discovered and was asked to be in a promotional film for War Bonds and also became the face of Rosie the Riveter. Not long after that, my face was all over the place, in the newsreels, playing at movie houses, and the newspapers. But the most popular one, and the one people most remember, were the posters. The most popular one came out in 1942 by the artist J. Howard Miller. There were also many other ones, including Norman Rockwell, and my face appeared at the Memorial Day edition of the Saturday Evening Post. After the war, I moved to Indiana, where I continued to work as a laborer. I worked on assembly lines as a seamstress, a beauty shop owner, and a taxi driver. I also discovered that I could build houses. I started my own company, Rose Builders. We specialize in luxury homes. At the age of 50, I finally obtained my pilot's license, and I even taught my daughter how to drive. In 1987, I was involved with a plane crash, damaging one of my kidneys, but I still lived to the age of 77, dying in 1997.
I would like to thank our presenters today. Of course, you can see that I don't do very well with memorizing things, but these folks sure do. And so I greatly appreciate their time and effort, as well as with Mr. Parks. He's worked closely with all 4 of these students. And so I'd just like to thank you as well, Mr. Parks.
And she didn't say this, but they wrote it on my block as well. Good job, good job.
So Rosie, I mean, the monologue then, was that based upon you doing research on it, and then you had to come up with what are the key facts and what is it that I would want to share if I was Rosie?
Good evening, my name is Emily Sanders, and I will be reading the good news from each of the schools for the month of January. Students at the Academy completed 217 APEX courses during the first semester. This is a 228% increase from the 2016-17 and the 150% increase from the 2015-16. These students and faculty have worked hard on attaining credits needed for their graduation requirements. 5th grade band students at Bloomfield Elementary performed at the high school, and for the first time by themselves for our entire school. Mr. Parks has worked extremely hard to develop and mentor these students. Students and staff members have collected 400 pounds of bottle caps to get a bench for our playground area, and now we're working towards our second bench. Bloomfield Middle School archery team is off to a fast start, already winning 2 different tournaments. The Boston School raised nearly $6,000 to support a former teacher who has undergone brain cancer. This was primarily raised by students, and we are very humbled and honored by their giving spirits. Cox's Creek Elementary School had a wonderful turnout at their Christmas program with the 4th and 5th grade students. This program was diverse and encompassed many learning targets in music. The Early Learning Center Leader and Me teams on culture, leadership, and academics. They're gearing up for a strong semester with student and staff recognition and student WIG's wildly important goals. They're academically focusing on male students to increase their overall kindergarten readiness in the district. Foster Heights students work diligently to complete their NTI Best Day work via Google Classroom. Nelson County High School sophomore Laurel Philpott won Cosair Charities and Gilda's Club Writing Contest. Also, freshman Holden Underwood has been selected for a KMEA All-State Choir. New Haven's music teacher Angela Bennett put on a great winter program in December. She held a K-3 program followed by a 4-5 program. There was a standing room only at both programs. The program was combined with our PTO Cookies with Santa program, which was equally successful. New Haven School was excited to host 2 successful community events. Thomas Nelson High School freshman Ryan Hack has started a monthly podcast. The podcast is called Communicate. It connects Thomas Nelson High School students with community leaders to discuss what it means to be a leader. 14 students out of the Nelson County ATC's phlebotomy technology class passed the NHA certification test to become certified phlebotomy technicians. These students had to perform 30 venipuncture sticks, 10 capillary sticks, and pass the NHA phlebotomy technician test.
Well, in that last group, that's some of the same students that came and stuck us that night.
Just want to remind everyone that this is Board Appreciation, School Board Appreciation Month, and our schools have been, all of our schools have been participating, and they've brought some gifts and different things for our school board members. But at this time, I'd like for all of us to kind of give a round of applause to these people who work so hard and diligently for our children. Next in this area, we'll introduce Ms. Jamie Schnall.
Hi, how are you guys? Hi, everybody. So I'm here to present several educators tonight. I'm super excited. The most that we've had at one board meeting that have received their Google Level 1 certification or their Google Level 2 certification. And so we'll go ahead and get started. When I call your name, if you'll come up and receive your certificate, and then just stay up here so we can get a group picture. Renee Shannon from Nelson County High School. Congratulations. Yes, absolutely. Amy Jo Sims from Cox's Creek. Congratulations to you. Amelia Satterley from Cox's Creek. You're welcome. Elizabeth Crow, or Beth Crow, like I call her, from Cox's Creek as well. Thank you. This lady was our very first Google certified educator at the board, and that is Anne Marie Williams. Congratulations, little lady. Holly Walker, which is the principal at the Early Learning Center. Congratulations. Jill Mattingly, which was not settled with level, she wasn't settled with level 1, so she went ahead and completed level 2 as well. So, level 1 and 2 certified. Scott Rouse. And he is obviously the principal over at the Horizons. Congratulations. Miss Cheryl Pyle. I'm ready. You want to be in the picture. You got to be in the picture. There you go. Congratulations. She is also at the board. And Mr. Drew Warschlager. Did I say your last name right? Oh, see, I'm so good. So they all call him Mr. W. So he received his level 1 certification as well. So we had a busy snow Christmas break, and then a couple of snow days, NTI days. So these are our level 1 and level 2 Google certified educators for the month of January.
Ms. Chanel?
Yes.
So, I mean, there might be a lot of people sitting in the audience that don't know, I mean, what does it take to be a Google certified educator?
So that's a really, look at
Yeah, because I heard from one of these members up here last night that they finished the 3-hour? 2-hour. 3-hour test with 7 minutes to spare.
Yeah, so they go through training. There are objective questions, and then there are performance questions where they actually have to do and interact with Google, within Google, and then they have to complete the test, which is 3 hours. So I would say probably an easy, at least 6 to 10 hours of work to receive this.
Right,
And that's just for level 1. That's not level 2.
And whenever you say within Google, of course, most people are going to think, oh, well, Google, that's where I go to type in, where's a good place to eat. It's not Google per se, as much as all the other tools
Right.
Like
Yes.
productivity tools, Google Classroom and all.
Yeah, so Google offers Google Apps for Education. And so our students are working within Google Drive, which you probably have heard about, or Google Classroom if you're a parent with NTI Days. So there are so many features that these teachers are going to be and administrators are going to be excelling at utilizing more, because now they know more and they've been trained and they're official. So fun. So congratulations.
I'm ready for a photo.
Squeeze, please.
Hey, you can squeeze, or if you'd like to get to right.
Don't. I don't care.
Oh, here, I don't mind. I'm wearing a dress. Oh, yeah, here it is. Come on. How are you? Can't say very good. Well, I'm strong. Jamie, nice picture. I think Jamie should always see this picture. Come forward.
Show up there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah. Couldn't have made it without you, girl.
So before we move on into agenda item 3C, I know a few parents and their children have already kind of slipped out. If there's anybody else, I mean, we completely understand that if you were here for the student performance piece or even for the Google certification recognition, if you all need to go on and slip out, or you're welcome to stay either way, we appreciate that. So item 3C, the NCSCSI update. That's coming to us.
Ms. White here.
What did you call us?
NCSCSI. Nelson County Schools Community Support, what's the I?
Foundation Incorporated.
Okay.
It was the foundation that threw me.
Okay.
Because usually we go by the Community Support Foundation. Obviously Nelson County Schools is the given. Incorporated is Tim's idea. No, but you know, it's to make us official. So thank you for inviting me here this evening, because I do want to share some of the things that are going on with the foundation. Probably the biggest thing that we get excited about are all the scholarships that we were able to give away in this past year. We're looking forward to not only another year of them, but I have some of the scholarships that have gone into their third and fourth year. So every year that we can establish a scholarship and keep that going for the next few years, that's our goal. But some have gone above and beyond that. I just have to mention again the Tyler Foster Scholarship. She raised over $10,000 last year and is looking at another $3,000 this year that she's already that they've had come in toward their scholarship fund. You don't realize how much this means to the families until you meet with some of them. I just met with another group. We're looking at bringing on an 8th scholarship in the following year. And to meet with the grandmother, the parents, the granddaughter who is attending school. All of these are Nelson County grads, every single one of them, and it means the world to them to be able to give a scholarship to a young person, the graduates of 2018 that will receive these. They said the biggest pat on the back that they feel is the recognition to that person that they are memorializing. So it just so that you know how valuable the tools are that you're using. I've applied for a number of grants for some, not just scholarship money, but also grant money that we can get back into the school system. I have received a couple of them, but only the one from Walmart and the Kiwanis Club has come through so far. We have applied for several more and hope to be receiving them in the later year. The biggest thing that we discussed just at our board meeting, we do hold a short board meeting previous to this, and so I'd like to report to you on that. We have the Nelson County Senior Alumni Night that will be held on, it's coming up on Thursday, April the 26th, and will be held at Thomas Nelson High School. We're going to give the public and obviously the board members, the staff, anyone that would like to attend. That is going to be by reservation only. It is going to be starting out with if you want to do a tour of Thomas Nelson. So we have a lot of people in the community that has not, if they don't have children in the school, they have no opportunity to go there. So we would really like a lot of those people to attend. We also will be giving away the T. Gerald Florence Outstanding Alumni Award. I'll be putting that in the paper this week. I wanted to get that approved of by our board first, but we will be putting that in the newspaper and speaking to our local groups to let them know that that is something that we would really like their input. They said they wanted to expand that search. Adam Wheatley said sometimes we'll keep it right within the school system and keep it more closely, but he would really like to see that expand and see that go out into all of the public. Of course, you do have to be a Nelson County grad, but those schools include so many. I'm just going to read it only because they were just amazed at the schools that are part of our system. We have, they have received, our alumni is from Bloomfield High School, Boston High School, Chaplin High School, Old Kentucky Home High School, Nelson County High School, and then again, Thomas Nelson High School. So you should be very proud of what you represent, and I appreciate you having me here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your work, Ms. White. Moving into item 4, operations consent agenda. These items include the information, personnel actions, treasurer's report, bills and claims, munis report, leaves of absence, minutes from previous meeting, as well as overnight or out-of-state trips approval. All of these items, again, being part of that operations consent agenda that we've had in advance to be able to review.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, a motion by Ms. Breeding to accept.
Second.
Second by Ms. Berry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on into item 5, efficient resource management. 5A, the draft budget for the 2018-19 fiscal year. Mr. Hawkinsmith.
Good evening. I'm going to start by seeing if Carla can flip. There we go. Oh, it's all right. That's the way I sent it to you, I'm sure. This draft budget, to remind you folks, is the first step in our annual budget process for the fiscal year that will begin here in a little less than a little over 5 months. In even years, it's a little trickier than it is in odd years, because as you all know, we're in the middle of a legislative session. I guess this is my 11th legislative budget session as an employee of this district, working through the issues as they affect the Nelson County schools. So I've been through the process before, but it's always it's a little different every time. It's always an interesting process. And I will tell you, I'm going to go through some highlights of this budget, then I will talk to you just briefly about some components of the governor's budget proposal that folks may or may not be aware of, and then I'll try to answer questions if you happen to have any. What I'm going to focus on here first is just the highlighted fields. Again, this budget we're not even required to send this to the Department of Education because it's a draft, and it's very early in the process. And again, the folks in Frankfort at the Department of Education don't even know what the final product is going to look like as it affects them, and of course as it affects us. If I can make this work, I hope I can. I may just have to. I'm not sure this is going to work. Well, we're going to shelve that idea then. The top right-hand column, the top line in the right-hand column, folks in the audience may not be able to see it, so I'll tell you what that says is $1.8 million, and what that reflects is our estimated beginning general fund balance for the fiscal 18-19 year. That sounds like a lot of money. It is a reasonable balance for a district our size to begin the year with. The concern, and you all know this, is we began this year with a little over 2.5 million in beginning balance, and there are a lot of factors. Enrollment, we've talked about that previously, some enrollment pieces. We've had some unexpected expenses that we're absorbing this year, et cetera, et cetera. So we're on pace at this stage in this fiscal year. We're expecting to dip into our balance to the tune of about $700,000. Next highlighted line that you see there is our estimated tax receipts for fiscal 19, and I'm estimating it at $10,750,000. And that is assuming at this point that the board would opt for the 4% tax rate. If we will go to the next page. Again, we only hit a few items here because this is we'll have a much more detailed conversation when we get to May, which is the tentative budget. Let's go to the next, scroll down just a little, Carla. This is an important number for folks to be aware. The highlighted number on the right there, again, folks may not be able to read that. It's $13 million. That's a lot of money. Okay, that's a lot of money. That's our SEEK allocation for fiscal 19. If you look at the center number there, though, that's our receipts for our budget for the current year. I'm sorry, 14 million. That's an accurate number. That unless we get cut, unless our allocation gets cut due to lower state receipts this year, we will receive just under $14.2 million. So 13 million sounds pretty good until you compare it to we're getting 14.2 million this year. Next year we're getting 13 million. That's a pretty close number. I know how to do these C calculations. I know what our trend data is. That's pretty a solid number. Now, if we get an influx of enrollment next year, that number is going to change. It goes up. That enrollment piece is critical to this whole process. Let's go back a column and let's look at fiscal 17. Column to the left there, you see in fiscal 17 we received 15.2 million. And again, you're seeing a trend here. And we'll come back to the governor's budget proposal, but as it stands now, if we continue at the current funding level without additional cuts that we'll talk about later, I'm looking at $13 million in SEEK. So the best case scenario in SEEK for our district is a drop of about $1.2 million from this year to next year, okay? I'm going to show you where we're going to make that up. Let's go through a couple of pages over to the expense side. We're just going to look at, I think, one number here, and then I'll talk about the governor's budget proposal. We're just going to stick in Fund 1 again because of the stage of the budget development that we're at. You can see that the current budget figure for salaries is a little over 15 million. We're projecting next year's salary budgets to be under $14 million. That's where we're making up most of that loss, if that makes sense. And that is a result of us adjusting staffing at each school to reflect actual enrollment. The next item on the agenda, after we approve a draft budget, is a staffing formula. So if you're concerned about that, we're not recommending any changes as it stands now to the staffing formula. We just have fewer kids, so it's going to require fewer teachers next year. So that's where we're going to make up at least some of that difference. And I don't know if I adjusted. Well, I don't have it highlighted, but if you'll go back to a couple more pages, Carla, I think it's page 7 on the PDF. Scroll down just a little bit, you've got the right page. You see that I currently have the second number from the bottom, far right column. Currently, I'm projecting a contingency drop next year. Remember, I said we were going to begin the year at 1.8 million. I'm currently showing us ending the year at 1.5 million next year. Now, I will remind you, we've talked about this before, one of the reasons we have a contingency is to get us through lean times. We don't want to hoard money, we want to be prepared. We know everybody has ebbs and flows and budgets, and we want to be prepared. I think we are if we make prudent decisions between now to get us through this period of time over the next several months. The governor's budget proposal, there's a couple of things I want to mention. I shared some of this information as it specifically affects Nelson County with some of our friends in Frankfort. And there are really 3 pieces that affect us very directly, or would if they were passed as proposed. Well, let me back up. The one that is already something we're going to have to absorb next year, we've talked about it many times. Folks are aware of the pension issue in Kentucky. The CERS matching rate for our employees goes up from around 19% to 28.05%. That's about a 50% increase. And if you multiply that by our total classified staff, it's over a $400,000 expense we incur next year, automatically, okay? Now, in addition to that, the governor's budget proposal calls for a reduction in transportation funding, drastic reduction in transportation funding through the SEEK calculation. Now, what's frustrating for folks like me, and I know folks like you, is they will say that the SEEK base has not been touched, and we know different. They keep one number here and they give you an adjustment down here, and you know, I think it was George Bush that used the phrase fuzzy math. Well, I think that would apply here. It's just not true. It is a cut if it goes through as presented. What that would mean to us, we have to transport kids. Okay, we got to transport them. The formula calls for us to receive about $2.4 million this year. We're going to actually get about $1.4 million, okay? The proposal, the governor's budget proposal, would reduce that to about $600,000 next year. We still got to run roughly this, we still got to transport the same number of kids. Got to get them to school, got to operate a fleet of 60 some odd buses, drive over 1 million miles, transport 3,000 kids a day for $600,000 for an entire year. They're proposing to fund it at about 25 cents on the dollar, and with no relief on the expense side, just taking it away on the revenue side. So there's a lot of folks that are upset about that. And again, I know this is early in the process. I certainly hope that doesn't get passed as proposed, but we do have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So that's a major impact on the district if it goes through. In addition to that, everyone knows health insurance costs rise each year, okay? Now, I will tell you, in the state system, health insurance costs overall they do a pretty good job of controlling costs because it's a self-insurance fund. But they are projecting, their budget request for health insurance for K-12 education was about $710 million. The budget allocation, $652 million, okay? So if the 710 figure is what's needed, 58 million is coming from somewhere. Now, where do you think that is? Us, okay? Now, if you divide that, if you take our percentage of the state education population and multiply by that $58 million, you come up with about $425,000 we would have to kick in to the health insurance program to continue to provide that for our employees. Again, that is not passed yet, but you know, you take those two additional cuts or shifted expenses in one case and a cut in another, and that's another $1.2 million. So what we're doing now, preparing for what we thought we were going to be facing, is not going to be near enough. We'll have to come back to you at the end of the budget process. And we're working on possible scenarios. Again, we plan for the worst and hope for the best. Those are a couple. In addition to that, the governor's budget proposal eliminates the professional development program. And I'm sure the staff here at the central office that work with that can limit or reduce cost in professional development. I'm sure we can reduce cost. We can't eliminate it. So what that would do is shift those remaining professional development costs to the district. We received this year a little over $100,000 for instructional resources. Again, the folks that manage our instructional program work with principals and staff, and they buy software with that and buy supplies, et cetera, and if that goes away entirely, that gets shifted to the general fund. So $425 for health insurance, $800,000 in reduction in SEEK funding for transportation, and a loss of those two programs. That's approximately $1.5 million that we would have to find in addition. And that's not going to be very easy to do, I will tell you. So we're going to hope for the best, and we're going to wait it out. But we'll be working again, planning for those scenarios and have a plan. We will have a plan. We just hope we don't have to implement it. So we're going to wait that out. Got any questions?
Okay. Mine's not exactly a question, but through KSBA, we've talked about the biggest obstacle will be transportation because the Constitution says, or somewhere in legislature, that is the state's responsibility to see that our children go and come from school. Now, on Kentucky Tonight, which I watched, they had last night these two, the Republicans versus the Democrat, and that's one thing that both of them agreed on, that it is the state's responsibility to make sure our kids get to school and from school. Now, as far as the insurance went, I know teachers, we're not all going to be thrilled, but they're talking about increasing the amount of money that each teacher will have to contribute to their own insurance, just like I do and just like you do. So that's another thing they've talked about last night, that would not, that they would still pay some, but not near as much as they've paid in previous years or even this year. But I thought the most important thing was the deal about the transportation, because like one of them said, it already eliminates the need for districts like us to buy new buses, which won't be happening this year, or for probably 2 years down the road. But that's what they were talking about last night, and I thought that was I just watched it by accident, really. I didn't aim to turn it on, but it had it on there, and I thought, well, gosh, I'll listen to, because some of them don't really give you any information. But that was what they were talking about, and KSBA is supporting a, sort of like a rally on the last day of this month, because I know you all got that information, and February 1st in Frankfurt, to let them know you're supposed to have meetings in the morning and then the next day for this very purpose, to see what needs to be done, or we would like to happen to see, what we need. And we all know what we need is not our money to be taken away from us. And you're right about that SEEK fund deal. One of them said, oh yeah, but we're not changing SEEK fund. The other one got, no, you better look again, because it's underlying what you were talking about, Kim. It's underlying the needs for our students and our teachers. I didn't like the deal about them taking away the funding for, or funds to be reimbursed by teachers. That's going to be knocked out too. I didn't like that either. So there's 4 or 5 things that cuts that we're going to fight for the last day of January, first day of February.
Well, it's all you have to do is look at our numbers, and you can see that the C base is not being, we just look at the numbers, those
Yeah.
are right off our annual financial report.
They want
our
you to,
budget,
they
what our
want it to
audits.
make good, but it's not good.
Yeah, thinking about it from, you were talking about questions, Ms. Robinson, thinking about it from timing, of course, this is our draft budget. Is it May is our tentative budget? So the tentative then, and I can't remember the exact date that the legislature is set to dismiss this year. It's usually, what, first week of April or so?
We usually know, they've got, I believe the date is sometime in April, that we have a pretty good idea what the final budget is. Again, the timing's tough though, because if they pass a budget that requires us to make additional cuts, Ms. Brown can tell you, we have notification requirements, dates that we have to meet to notify folks if we're going to address additional positions.
Sure.
And if we don't meet those requirements, we can't do anything about it. So, you have a very narrow window of time there sometimes to make those, to do that work and to make those decisions. That's why we're not going to wait until the very last day. We're going to be prepared, have multiple options, and hopefully be able to proceed with what we recommend, what you're adopting tonight, if you choose to adopt it. But again, we'll just have to wait through, follow that process out. We watch it very closely. Mr. Brown sent me an email today from an organization in Frankfurt, I don't remember who now, but a lot of budget conversations underway. And that's going to continue for the next few weeks, for sure. And we'll just have to wait to see what happens.
Well, I mean, I think that probably not only, it sounds like not only for us as board members, but also even staff, community members, parents, keeping a close eye on that, because it sounds like everything that you're sharing and things that so far we're starting to hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, starting to hear in the media, is that the executive and legislative branch are not interested in tax reform or revenue issues, meaning finding new revenue forms. It's just an interest in cutting. And I think that also at times, not only can that have a challenge for being able to provide those services, like you were saying, transportation services, but also a lot of times what that means can be, legislature says, we didn't change taxes, we didn't raise taxes, but whether it's a local school board or a local county government or a local city government, maybe then has to try and figure out, if we've already cut everything to the bone, where's that additional revenue going to come from? It's going to be through those local governing bodies that then have to do something with tax rates.
I agree. When I talk to folks in Frankfort, I have recently, I just ask, I understand. We have to cut things here. I understand we have to cut things. We understand that. I just ask you, consider both sides of the equation. If you're going to take away revenue, give us some flexibility on the expense side. Give us, whether it's a temporary change in cap size, whether it's whatever it might be, just give us some flexibility. Not that we would even do those things, but give us the options to choose, so we might not have to cut people that we need. And hopefully they will, they'll consider those things. I'll tell you a couple other things related to all this, and we've talked about this first one many times, really both of them. We spent in fiscal 17 in this district $541,000 on KTRS match. And I'll just remind you, a few years ago we spent nothing on that. That's another shifted cost from the state to school districts, because they've got to shed cost. They got no place else to send it. They shift it to us. We have to absorb that. So that's just in the last few years. We in addition to all these other things we've talked about. And I know sometimes in our conversations we talk about the percentage of state funding versus local funding in our general fund. Well, I can tell you in 2008, in our budget, and I pulled this just to confirm these numbers are right, in 2008, the state covered 63.82% through SEEK and other sources of our general fund budget, 63.82, 2008. In 2017, their percentage was 49.58. And in 2018, this year, it's going to drop below that and drop again next year. So I would say in 2 or 3 more years, those percentages will have completely flipped. We'll be at 65, the state will be at 35 if the trend continues. And that's not fuzzy math. That's just look at our audits. Anybody can see it.
And that doesn't mean as a community, I mean, the biggest economic engine in any community is a solid educational system. And we're lucky here, we've got 3 good educational systems, us, the city schools, and our Catholic parochial school system. We're starting to see that economic engine at work with some of the industry that's coming in here. But, in my opinion, for the Commonwealth to say, it's not their responsibility to provide a fully funded educational system, which I think within the Kentucky Constitution there is conversations to that effect, then that means that, again, I'll say bluntly, the legislature then is failing the citizens by saying, well, we're not going to address the issues, we're going to let you all have to deal with it at the local level.
Yeah. In addition to the disparity in the state and the shift from the responsibility from the state to the local, the gap in districts per pupil amounts to spend has grown. We have to spend a lot less than a lot of districts on a per pupil basis, and that has grown over the last number of years. And we've talked about this several times over the years. There are still inequities, and they seem to be, that spread seems to be widening, and hopefully at some point that'll be addressed as well. The problem with that is when you change the formula, there are winners and there are losers. If you allocate more money to the existing formula, everybody wins. If you change the formula and there are losers, they have legislators too. So it's very difficult to get change made there, even if it's the right thing to do. So.
I'm sorry, one other thing, and this is more, I didn't ask from the community piece as well, something as proponents of public education. I mean, that's why each of us are here. That's why we do what we do. That's why the teachers that I look out here and I see in the audience, that's why you do what you do as well. And those of you that were parents of some of those that were here earlier, I mean, you have a belief in public education. I think while we've just heard that while things aren't dire, we're going to have some challenges that we've got to figure out, and we're lucky to have you, Mr. Hoggins-Smith, because you're already thinking ahead a couple of years to help us through that. But there's 173 districts, 172 other districts in the Commonwealth. It may not happen this upcoming school year, but at this trend, if as advocates for public education, we don't start saying to our legislators, and whether that's through contacts or through the ballot box, and say that we value public education, I can predict, and I think some of us in the audience may also see that, there will be some public school districts closed. And in parts of the Commonwealth, there are only county school districts. There's a county school district up I-64 that has half the size of our district in the whole county. I'm not talking about public students, I'm talking about residents in the county. So think about how small that school district is then. That school district potentially is going to disappear because of the lack of support for public education within the Commonwealth.
We have 2 of them now that's on the verge of.
And there have been in the past 30 years 2 districts that have consolidated, Independence with counties, and that was for fiscal issues, for financial issues. But unless we're willing to actually say, whether it's as a board or even as concerned members within the community, that we advocate for public education, we're going to start to see that happen again for districts that have been known to be good districts that will just start to disappear. And I apologize, that's a soapbox when it comes to budget issues.
The only thing I disagree with, all what you said there, is if the budget that's proposed gets passed, it's dire now.
Yeah, yes, I agree with you, yes.
If it doesn't, then we can survive it.
I agree with you.
It's dire now if they pass that budget.
Okay, but I want to ask Tim, out of the 173 districts, what does Nelson County rank as spending on per pupil?
It fluctuates. We've been as low as 160th. I'd have to check where we rank in fiscal 17. That probably is available though. I haven't checked recently, but it fluctuates. But I will tell you, they're just comparing districts locally. And I haven't done this for a couple of years, but I've checked multiple times. And the districts are not identical, so there's going to be some disparity. But district right here in this county has $800 more per pupil to spend than we do. And again, there's differences, so there's some explanation for that. Don't get me wrong, but let's just say we got 4,000 students. If we had $800 more per pupil, that's $3.2 million. We can absorb. We'd have a different situation. So there's just disparities, and that district that I'm referring to is not a wealthy district by a long shot. There are districts that have a lot more than that to spend on a per pupil basis than we do. So there's inequities, but I think it's going to be a while before we see any change there, maybe a long time. So.
But is that based on monies per pupil? Is that based on a government formula? Is it based on our formula? How do we come about that? I mean, why isn't more money spent on per child?
Well, if you go to the state website, and anyone can do this.
Yes.
You go out and there are annual financial statements out there, spreadsheets that compile all the districts. You can just go to it's got the average daily attendance of each of those districts and the total expenses. You simply go out there and divide one by the other and it gets you a per pupil expenditure figure. And you rank them. And you see it. Everybody can do that pretty quickly. You have to know enough about the numbers to know that there are certain things that will skew numbers, like fund transfers and other things. If you factor that in, you need to adjust for that. But there's a big disparity. You'll have some districts that spend $14,000 or $15,000 per pupil. You'll have others that spend $8,500. In the same state.
And that's due to some of it, though, is due to economical disadvantages and
Yeah.
advantages. I mean, there's a formula. I just want people to know, it's not, we don't choose not to spend that money on those kids, on our kids. It's got to do with a formula that the state uses to say, okay, now this, if you have, just to say, the county has more students in need, so they get more monies. See, and we don't.
And it also includes the tax rate for that individual.
Yeah, I don't want everybody to think we're not spending money on our kids.
No, our school board has done it better
That's what
than
I'm
they
saying.
do.
I don't want people to think we're
No,
not
no,
spending
that's
money
not
on
right.
our
The
kids.
school
It's
board here
just we
has done-
don't get that kind
you
of
know,
money to
The school board
spend.
has done about what they can do. There have been very few times, you all take criticism for it, but very few times over the years where you didn't levy the 4% rate. And again, if you look at where we rank, we need to levy that rate to try to stay competitive. You know, and to be able to provide for the students in the district what we need to provide. So it's not a local issue. There are inequities and there are some state funding issues, you know, that are the drivers of the problems, the way I look at it.
But they're not looking, what aggravates me more than anything is the legislature in the state is not looking anywhere else but to cut. They're not, like one of the gentlemen said last night, they're not looking, he's not looking for anything to say, okay, let's give them let's put a penny more on the tax, you know, instead of 6%, 7% or whatever. He's not looking, because one of the gentlemen said that the state of Kentucky is not ready for that kind of a blow. But we're ready for this kind of blow, but we're not ready for a penny more. Or we're not ready for a casino to be put on, you know, for gamble, and, because we all know how people feel about that. So that's why we're in the position, the state will be in the position it is right now. So that's my soapbox.
Mr. Hawkinsmith, I mean, on this here, since this is a draft budget, will we need to approve this budget for tonight? Which, again, it is draft. This is not the final, and especially since, as we've just said and you've shared, that we won't know the true impact of what the General Assembly does on the statewide budget, the funds that come to us, until probably very early April.
Yeah, April board meeting, we should be able to report that to you.
Okay.
But I do need you all to approve this.
So, do we have any other questions for Mr. Hawkinsmith right now? I mean, we're going to have several more opportunities between now and May, and even between May and September when we set the final budget, which always to me has been so weird that after the start of the fiscal year is when we legally set that budget. That's the way every school district does it. It's the way.
But after you set your tax rate.
Yeah, exactly, after set the tax rates. But are there other questions we might have right now? So with that then, do I have a motion to approve the draft budget for FY 2019 as presented?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Ms. Dye,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Breeding. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Again, Mr. Hawkinsmith, I mean, you do a terrific job of making sure that the district does due diligence whenever it comes to finances. We appreciate that.
Well, and I also think you do an excellent job of explaining it.
Yes. Moving on to 5B, which is the staffing formula. Again, Mr. Hawkinsmith.
Well, the good news, and you know, we don't have a lot of good news tonight, but the good news, at least for now, is we're recommending a staffing formula that's unchanged. This is what we are using now to staff our schools. This is what we want to use next year to staff our schools. And if I had my wish, the next time we change it, it won't be to cut it, it'll be to give more staff, not less. You know, I did, when I saw the governor's budget address and went out and reviewed the budget online that evening, came in the next day, and the first thing I did was go to our site-based allocation and looked. And if we were to cut to cap, which I would never recommend. I mean, I don't think schools can sustain that. But if we were to, we couldn't get to the cuts that we have to get to if we were to cut the cap across our district. We don't have extra people out there through the formula. We'd have to find other places, other areas to cut to do that, I think. We might have to come back to this, but our goal is going to be to stay away from as much as we possibly can. But tonight's recommendation, until we hear from friends in Frankfurt, is for that to remain unchanged.
And so as far as whether it's certified or classified, everything from classroom teacher numbers to based upon enrollment, based upon number of students, to Administrators, principals, assistant principal, all that has stayed.
Custodians, down the line, instructional assistants, unchanged, at least as of now.
Okay. And so this is for next fiscal year,
Yes,
next
sir.
school year? Okay. Any other questions on it? Okay, do I have a motion? Motion by Ms. Breeding to approve the attached staffing formula for FY 2019.
Second.
Second by Ms. Berry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 5C, so Mr. Hawkinsmith showed tonight, this is the SFCC offer of assistance for construction.
Actually some good news. There was some movement in Frankfurt that released the funds. Mr. Jackie works with this on a regular basis, I think. But we did get SFCC technology offers 1 and 2 together.
This first one's construction.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought we were doing technology first. I should have listened more closely. Construction, this is good news too. It's an offer of assistance we get every 2 years from our friends in Frankfurt at the School Facility Construction Commission. The good news is we got an offer in the amount of $8,884. The bad news is that's a pretty small number. You guys have been around a while, you know they used to be a lot larger than that. Just so you know, that number is going to bond about $100,000. So that offer that we can use as of 7/1/2018 would bond an additional $100,000 in projects in the school district. You know, it is something that we'll share with the LPC that we have to seek this summer as we start to develop a facility plan recommendation for the board. But it's something, it's just not what we used to see.
On this, are you hearing any murmurs talk at all during this legislative session about other SFCC dollars for construction?
I have not personally, that doesn't mean the conversations aren't going on. I haven't seen anything.
I know there's been a few years where there has been specific dollars added to earmarked towards construction for school, K-12 public school facilities. Of course, with all that we've just discussed, it's most likely unlikely.
Well, one of the things that's frustrated me, and I'll make this quick, but what happens is our district has maintained our facilities. Okay?
Yep.
There are school districts in Kentucky that appeal to the legislature, and the legislature will bail them out because they don't maintain their own. We have maintained our own here. Mr. Brown and some of us went to Frankfurt yesterday and were recognized for our energy efficiency. You all are aware of that. We have nice facilities. We maintain nice facilities, I think, for our students. And if there are projects funded, you may be talking about, call an earmark, I guess, if you want, but where specific districts are awarded funds for specific projects, but it's not through a formula that's spread across the state.
Yeah, I know in past years there have been, and the term earmarks is a good term for it, earmarks towards specific districts that had not been doing the job that we do as a community here in Nelson County. So, any other questions on the SFCC offer for construction? Okay, so good news, just not enough, so we'll need a motion to approve the attached offer of assistance for construction as presented.
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Berry.
Second.
Second by Ms. Dye. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 5D is the School Facilities Construction Commission offer of assistance for technology, KETS offers.
Gotcha. These were delayed, as we discussed before, but there was some movement in Frankfurt to release those, and we have an offer in front of you that accounts for offer 1 and 2. It totals $65,459 from the SFCC in Frankfurt. If you choose to approve this tonight, we're recommending that you do. We will have to set aside a dollar for dollar amount, $65,459 of general fund dollars to match that, and we're prepared to do that. And then a few weeks from now, we'll receive our money from the state that will be set aside. It's only for technology purchases, teacher laptops or Chromebooks or things of that nature. And we certainly always have a need there. So there's been some talk in the district, and we're excited about the possibility of a one-to-one program one day if funds allow, and funds like that help us do things like that for students. So I recommend you approve that.
Any questions on the KETS offer? Okay, so then we'll need a motion to approve the SFCC offer of assistance for technology.
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Breeding.
Second.
Second by Ms. Dye. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Appreciate it, Mr. Alderman Smith, thank you.
Thank you.
5E, the snow makeup day, Mr. Morris.
Good evening. As you know, we missed 5 days recently because of snow. We used 3 days of our non-traditional instruction days where the teachers work with the students via Google Classroom and other ways to make those up. So we have 2 snow days that we want to make up or we need to make up. First one, January the 8th, that we'd like to make that up on February the 19th, and then January 16th on March the 9th. If we have any more, hopefully we won't. Our next place that we'd be looking would be May the 25th. We have as one other place. We don't have a lot of room in this calendar.
February 19th is President's Day.
Yes, sir.
But so far, we've actually missed 5 total days.
Correct.
But the other 3 that we don't see listed here were the non-traditional instruction.
That's correct.
As you said, Google Classroom.
And we missed one other, if you remember, earlier in the year for the eclipse, and that was the other day, February the 16th, that we already used as a makeup for that.
Gotcha, okay. And with the NTI days, because you mentioned hopefully we wouldn't have any more snow days, but we also still have some additional NTI days we could use?
Yes, sir. We don't want to use additional ones if we can help. We feel like the best instruction is having those children in the classrooms with their teachers. It is an option that we still have in our pocket if we have to, but that's going to be the last option after we go to that May the 25th. We'd bring that to you and ask you for that before we ask for another non-traditional instructional day. But if we do hit some of that bad weather and, later on, we can still use NTI day.
And it's always one of those double-edged swords too. I know there's some folks that are against NTI days in the community. Some parents don't like them, some love them, same way with students. But if not, we have 3 more days already. We'd be trying to find somewhere to tack on, and most of the time that's at the end of the calendar.
We as educators believe the best place for our students obviously is going to be in the building, in the schools. But as you said, we start looking at things, changing graduation dates and all those things, would get real awkward if we didn't have those NTI days to give us some flexibility.
And on this, I'll just throw out too, for anybody in the audience, there has been a bill filed in the legislature by Senator Givens that would sunset NTI days within the next 3 years, which means that option would be removed for public school districts. Luckily here in central Kentucky, we don't have snows like in eastern Kentucky, who at times can have 4 weeks worth of school that they have to make up somehow. So, and there is no more that, oh, isn't there 10 days that we just automatically get free that we don't have to make up? That's non-existent. That's not even a real thing. So, need a motion to approve the makeup days, January 8th being made up on February 19th and January 16th being made up on March 9th as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Motion by Ms. Dye.
Second.
Second by Ms. Breeding. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Morris.
Thank you.
Moving on then to item number 6A, the Lincoln Trail District Health Department contract and related policy. Mr. Leathers, this is the one you talked with us a little bit about at our work session, wasn't it?
Yes, Mr. Dye, I did. Yes, so we talked about this at our working session, and here we are today. So we have a contract that's been received and presented to you guys to proceed with the Medicaid billing through our school nurses and through Lincoln Trail Health Department. We must sign a contractual agreement with them. Basically, we're operating under their provision to do Medicaid billing. So the contract that you have in front of you is what we need to approve in order to move forward into this progress.
And this is one that we hope can help us recoup some of the cost of the nursing folks within our school buildings, which we've all been very much in support of.
Yes. There's the potential for that, of course. That's what we hope. We've got our nurses in place. We're covering our district and our students' medical needs. And we're trying to use this as an option to help generate revenues back into the district.
If we approve this tonight, when would it go into effect?
We are hoping, there's several things, Mr. Jackie. We've got training, certification, we've got to look at our buildings, we've got some things that we may have to buy, for example, file cabinets, things that they'll have to provide us per this contract. We hope our target, March 1st, that's what we like to do. Once you approve this, then we would notify Lincoln Trail. They would then file for a Medicaid number. There's a waiting period for that. We have to wait for that to come in. We could start the paperwork, but not the actual billing when we're fully trained. And then when the billing number comes in, then we could take the paperwork and then submit it as billing. Remember, there's also a delay. If you look at the contract, they process a check to us about once a quarter. So we'll have to generate money, wait for the check to come in, about once a quarter.
And
But we're
remember
still
this,
helping our kids.
And this contract?
but this contract is only through the end of this school year.
Yes, it's only through June 30th. They have a new contract each and every school year. So I will
Okay.
be back to you at that point, see how we're progressing and see if we want to get into this again for another school year.
Which also gives us a chance to evaluate Lincoln Trail District Health Department as that partner of ours.
Yes, and ourselves.
And exactly, and ourselves too. Okay, so then we would need a motion to approve and accept the Lincoln Trail District Health Department contract and the related policy as presented.
If you would wait, let's do the policy separate.
Separate? Okay, well, we will start off then with the Lincoln Trail District Health Department contract approval motion.
Motion. I'm sorry. It's okay. It makes no difference.
Okay, we'll make motion by Ms. Breeding then, and a second by Ms. Berry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And then whenever it comes to the policy, other than,
With the passing of the contract, now we need to remove a particular barrier that we have. That's a policy that you have in front of you, 092241. And it's to strike out some wording that basically would prevent us to do what we need to do in the Medicaid billing side.
okay, which then allows us to
Allows us to-
start to set those wheels into motion.
That's correct.
And it would also be as part of the contract, they authorize our nurses through them to provide some over-the-counter medication, which we, as our policy at this point in time, says we cannot do.
So basically, the nurses are our employees working as employees for Lincoln Trail.
Agents.
As agents for Lincoln Trail. That's why they have to maintain certain parameters and certain things that they call out this contract in order to bill for them or through them.
Okay. On this, with it being a policy, will this one require two
This-
readings?
Yes, it
Yes,
does.
Okay, so this would then be our
This is the
first reading.
The second reading will be proposed next month.
Okay. Any other questions on the policy portion of this? Okay. So then we would need a motion to have, as far as the first reading, policy 09.2241, looks like, that is related to the Lincoln Trail District Health Department Medicaid partnership.
Contractual.
Yeah.
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Breeding.
Second.
Second by Ms. Dye. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Appreciate it, Mr. Letters. Thank you. Item number 7, student and shareholder engagement. 7A is the superintendent search process. Ms. Breeding?
So I talked to Owens yesterday, and there's really, nothing, new to report. We're kind of in a lull right now because the position's been posted, and he is going to be here next month to kind of update us on next steps, things like that, because the position will be coming to a close. But until that happens, there's really nothing new to report.
Okay. And if I remember the last time he was here, didn't he allude to the fact that once that when the did close, then he would share, here's the total number of candidates that did apply?
Yes.
Not necessarily names or internal, external, but just quantity?
Right.
Okay. Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. Item 7B then, superintendent update, Mr. Brown.
There's just a few things that I want to, I think you've already mentioned one of them, the use of NTI best days, that there has been a resolution in the Senate of the State Assembly to do away with that. And if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was unanimous. I think it was 48-0 to do away with this or to phase it out. So these may be going out that we've been using for the last few days. We've been judicious with the NTI days because of the needs of our staff and parents and everything. And I think that's the way it should be. Just because they give us 10 doesn't mean we have to use 10.
Well, and also the rigor of it. I mean, I know you've got a K-12 age student. I had 2 of them at my house, mine and his friend, and I saw them working on the computer through Google Classroom, and the materials were not, I will call, a worksheet, which I think that's been some of the concern too, has been, is there a level of rigor with it? But I think our staff here in the district put that rigor in place even when we do have NTI days.
The second thing is that Tim mentioned it, but I want to make sure that everybody understands that yesterday, myself and Mr. Hawkinsmith, Kevin Magley, Todd Sanders, and Josh Bunch, with some of our partners, went to Frankfort and received an award from the Kentucky School Board Association as the #3 school district in the state in energy savings. And that's an outstanding thing. We've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years in energy savings for this district that they can reapply and reuse in different ways. So that's been a very successful program in that. Also at that time, they represented their 400th Energy Star School, recognized that. So that was also at that. So we were very well represented, and I felt really good that we received that award. The Commissioner's Office has informed me that on January 30th, they will be doing their interviews for our vacant District 1 school board member. I understand there are 2 applicants, and they will be interviewing those applicants on that day. Here in the board office, we're just giving them the space. We don't participate whatsoever in that. They go in there and there'll be 2 or 3 people from Frankfort here to do the interviews. They will then make their recommendation to the commissioner, and the commissioner will then appoint someone to finish Mr. Norman's term for the remainder of that time. They did not give me a date or a specific date that would happen. The commissioner is very busy during this legislative term, but he assured me that we would have somebody for our February board meeting and that we'd be able to swear them in at that time so they'd be a full participant in the superintendent search. The other thing that if you heard Mr. Hawkinsmith talk to you all today about budget issues and concerns and everything, I want you all to know that we're doing the very best that we can do to tighten the belt during this school year and to meet our obligations, of course, but not be spending money frivolously, but make sure that we're getting the most bang for our dollar. Our people have done a great job in doing that, but we are working very hard at being frugal during the remainder of this year, also in the budget process. It's been difficult. It's going to be tougher. This is not a enjoyable time in schools, and since my time in 42 years, I believe this is the most drastic cuts and potential cuts that have ever been proposed in education. So it is a tough time. We'll get through this. The leadership's good, and we'll work very hard to provide Nelson County with quality assurances that we're doing the right thing with the money that we receive. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it, Mr. Brown. Moving on to item 7C, which is guest comments. Any person wishing to address the board may do so by following these rules. Individuals representing themselves are limited to 3 minutes. Individuals representing a group are limited to 5 minutes. Please step up to the microphone, state your name and address, and if you represent a group, please state the name of the group you are representing. Is there anybody that would like to address the board and the room? Okay. With that, then, I would need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Ms. Dye,
Second.
second by Ms. Breeding. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. There is no executive session.
Thank you all very much. This has been nice.
Yes.